So, religious marriages. There's been an emergence in popularity of couples going into religious-only marriages. When I talk about religious-only marriages, I'm talking about the Nikah contract. So I'm talking about Islamic marriages. If I'm going to be a real damp squid about it, I would say that I've seen it being used as a tool to protect assets, both by men and women. Because, and the reason being behind it is that the nikah, the Islamic marriage, is not recognised as a legal marriage in this country. And as a result, they don't have recourse to financial rights by way of the being married or separating after marriage. They are seen only as cohabiting couples. So only rights that apply to cohabiting couples apply to those who've entered a nikah-only marriage. And the sad thing is, Naj, I have seen, honestly, I've had elderly women who have come to me and said that my marriage is over and my husband wants a separation and he wants to remarry. What are my rights? And when I'm talking about elderly women, I've had a woman who's about 70 who's come to see me, and she literally had a walking stick and she said, help me, what are my financial rights? And it was a really sad situation because all I could say to her was, there is only one recourse through the courts, which is TLATA. It's known as TLATA. It's Trust of Land Acts application. It's essentially a civil application where you are asking the court to decide whether you have an interest in any assets or property mainly, and what level of that interest is. It's long and it's extremely expensive. And I've seen people use that route if there is a big matrimonial property, like, you know, down south, there tend to be larger values, larger equities. But in the north, when you're looking at around about 70, 80, maybe £100,000 equity, you're going to be spending about £50,000 to get there. So is it actually worth it? So in the end, I had to say to this woman that you have very limited rights, and unless you can come to an agreement, which you're not going to be the main driver in that agreement. It's going to be, you know,
there's no negotiation.
The owner of the property calling the shots, yeah. And then if you haven't got protection by way of your name on the property, then you are looking at very, very limited rights. So what would your advice be to someone who says, I'm thinking of going into this religious marriage only to protect my rights. I don't want the other party to have any of my assets. Where do you go from there?
There's removing the cultural part of it away, because you always have to respect what the culture of your client is. Whether it's I'm dealing with financial advice, I'd say, look, hold on a minute. You go into this with your eyes open and say, you know, look, you don't have, from a financial perspective, you don't have any of the tax reliefs. So inheritance tax, anything passed to you, you're going to pay inheritance tax on it if there is a lot of money in there. You don't have rights over property, like, again, gifting things, no capital gains tax. But also, if you make it clear that actually there should be a backup, that actually, you know, if you need to buy your own house and you're living there rent free and you're earning, make sure you have, perhaps maybe buy your own property.
Yeah. Well, that's definitely the backup. That's what if I had sort of the non-asset owning party saying to me, I'm entering into this kind of marriage, this religious marriage, what can I do to protect myself? Obviously, the first point is make it a legal marriage if you can, because then you've got the rights of the law to help you. But then, like you said, put your name on any property if that's an option. Have a cohabitation agreement that we spoke about earlier to protect yourself. There's things you can do. The main thing for me is that clients don't realise always that a religious-only marriage is not legal. That's the starting point for me, in terms of what rights does that come with, or lack of rights. Because if it's a cohabitation agreement, that's the only protection you've got as to what will happen if our marriage or our religious marriage fails. We talk a lot about the nikah contract itself and using that in a cultural or religious sort of with a lens to say we will make this work from a religious point of view, but using the nikah contract as a prenup. of sorts within the religious context. That's another way to protect yourself. But you're going to essentially look at it as a financial advisor from as a cohabitee point of view.
Yeah. So in terms of it depends on what the asset is. So property, you've talked about TLATA. You're probably more of an expert than me on that. In terms of sort of pension assets and things like that, or savings, the issue now is that if you're not married, you'll pay a hefty amount of tax if it's over the inheritance tax threshold, which is difficult, because if you're relying on it and people don't know that there's a certain amount of money to get paid to you, you don't have it. So if you get divorced before you retire, you don't have that access, you are facing a big shortfall of only a state pension if you've made proper.
But let's talk to me a little bit about if you're a cohabitee, because that's what you would be under religious marriage, and any chance at getting the other party's pension.
I don't think there is any.
That's right.
That's
a big thing.
It's a big thing. They can put you on the nomination form.
Yeah.
But it's up to essentially the pension trustees. And if you talk about lots of ISAs, I don't think there's any, because it's an individual's account. And I think the law, from what I was doing a little bit of research, has got a lot to catch up on, because it's not unusual, not just outside of, say, the Nikah contract. People aren't getting married now.
Yeah.
More and more people are choosing not to get married. A couple of my friends, they don't want to get married. They've just decided it's not, for them.
Yeah.
Even though they've got kids. And there are other impacts as well of, like, I think ask the question is how much, what is it, what's fair? What are you expecting? So, okay, for each year you're married, I want a certain amount, because how much are you sacrificing? Are you sacrificing a career, which comes in turn with the savings that you could put into an ISA, the pension contributions you would make, which would then fund the national insurance contributions that you're not making, because so you haven't got a state pension. All of those things, how much is it? If you're talking about writing, I want a certain amount of money for each year we're married, because if you were the party that stayed home to raise the kids, man or woman now, actually, or if you work part-time to support the marriage, I want something for that.
I mean, those we can discuss in terms of what the court looks at in terms of division of assets, and we spoke earlier that children are a priority in terms of their housing needs. But for a couple that have a religious marriage only and don't have the full protection of those matrimonial factors you're talking about, earning capacity, contributions, looking after children, that kind of thing, my concern is and this is something we discussed in an earlier chat, was how do you have those conversations? How does an individual from the Muslim community, for example, for the sake of argument, I'll take a young woman who's agreed to enter into a Nikah-Only contract, right? How, and often, Naj, I see that the precursor to that is we will get registered, but we'll have it in a short while. We'll have it months later. And I've seen that never happens as well.
Right.
So that's the carrot that's being dangled, that we'll register it and then you'll have full protections of the pension, of ISAs, of anything else, the tax breaks that you're talking about. But honestly, out of my 27 years of practice, I have had one woman that came to me and said, after learning that my Nikah marriage wasn't legal, I had a conversation with my husband, who I'd been married to for 15 years, and we have now set a date for legalising it and getting it registered, right? And I think the confusion arises because the Nikah contract, if that same Nikah contract was carried out in a country that recognised it, so in an Islamic country, Saudi Arabia, Dubai, Pakistan, then the same words, the same promises, the same agreements within that contract are valid because they're done in a country that recognises them. So if they came to the UK, valid marriage. But if they had that same ceremony in this country, it's not legal, right? So that is a huge confusion piece anyway. Yeah. So the teaser is, let's have a Nikah-Only marriage. Well, the registration will follow, but often I've seen it doesn't. And then they are in the young bride-to-be is in this Nikah-Only, or looking at this Nikah-Only marriage. How does she have the conversation with the elders in what is quite a patriarchal society or community to say, right, I want full disclosure of the assets.
I think firstly it's an education piece. So like, again, I mean, this comes down to like, where is the access of financial information? So having that point of someone saying, look, you know, maybe have a meeting with someone yourself, but these are things you need to know. You need to know what assets you've got.
Yeah.
If you're having children, you know, these are the impacts. And then maybe have a sit down and say, do you realise if something happens, I'm going to be left with nothing? And from a point of view of sussing out what watch their reaction and see if there's an empathetic reaction or not.
Yeah.
And because I've often, you know, business negotiations follow the same kind of suit. They're like, do you realise if one person's asking, do you realise what will happen to me and my business that I've spent? And they're just like, well, you know, you're like, I don't want to deal with you, thanks very much, because you've got to know that person is at least wanting a fair deal. A good negotiation, both parties walk away feeling like they've got a fair deal for the situation. One party still may have less, but
that's a good point. It's about negotiation.
It's not really a discussion, it's a negotiation.
Yeah.
So the mindset of it, of like, actually, there's a disparity. One person has the power and one person doesn't.
Yeah.
You know, of that really kind of like, so it's, unfortunately in that situation, it's on the person to educate themselves and go into it eyes open, with the clarity they've got that actually, if this goes wrong, I would have lost a lot, and the time to make it up, more importantly, because you can't buy back time. You can't go back 20 years and start your career again. Again, maybe watching those sort of things. If it's still something you want to go through because, you know, it's something that emotionally you feel attached to, be realistic and say, you know, you need to start making your own plans. I want my own, you know, I want my own bank account. I need to work. I need to, you know, I want to, you know, pursue a career. I need a personal pension. I need an ISA. I need these. I need my bank account. I need to make sure there's something there. If one of these just occurred to me, if your partner dies and you don't inherit,
you're not even next of kin.
There you go. You need a life policy that's going to make sure you pay out.
This is what people need to, you know, really bear in mind.
When you get divorced, is people don't realise you can insure the maintenance payments from your, you know. If they're a huge amount and you've never worked, that person has a heart attack. Practically, you've got 2 kids. What are you going to do? The family don't have to give you anything.
I had a client that exactly that happened to, but with a twist, in that this lady was married for about 21 years, and she had a Nikah-Only with this chap, and contributed to the family home. She moved into his home, contributed, built extensions, refurbished, you name it, lived happily as a cohabiting, religious marriage only couple. He then goes to Pakistan, has a heart attack and dies, right? His adult children from a previous marriage, from which he had a legal marriage but didn't have a legal divorce, came back to reclaim the property.
Yeah.
So, you know, the consequences and the impact of not having these conversations early and protecting yourself are huge.
Massive. There was an estate planner I used to know, and she got into it because her brother died and he'd kept his will before the divorce. They were separated and his wife just took everything. And they didn't even have kids. And, you know, and it was awful. It was one of the
disaster stories.
It was.
I mean, we don't need to scare people, but what we're saying is,
these things do.
Please have these
died at 23. Like you say to people, I was very fit and healthy.
Yeah.
And a small operation to remove some skin, serious sepsis, very nearly died. Then I was paralysed, and then I was like, you know, so it's like, and I was only 37, and very like running all the time and things like that, you know, and it's. That could have very, you know,
happen at any time.
But all those things do happen. We like to live in this bubble where we don't think these things happen. Fortunately, it happens all the time.
So what would be your top 3 bits of guidance to a woman who has a religious marriage only?
Okay, so in terms of the house, if you buy a house together, get some equity in it, get on the title, and it's a very good idea. In terms of making sure if something happens to your husband and you're not going to inherit, making sure there's life insurance policies that will actually pay out to you in trust. You know, things, something like family income benefits, also a very good idea. Death lump sum benefits are a very good idea. Making sure actually making sure that you actually trust the person and their family, because the family might own the wealth and have control over everything, and there's nothing you can do There's nothing. If it's a business, can you own shares of it? You could have shares in the business, although that may actually negate why they want to have a Nikah marriage. Therein lies the conflict.
That's it.
When one person has all the wealth, but most of all, recognise that you are, if you're coming to the negotiation table, you are seriously hampered. You're going to a negotiation with your hands tied behind your back.
Absolutely.
It's, you know.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
I'd rather you have that discussion than me.
We can both have it. We can both have it. Thank you, Naj.
No worries.